Alright, let's take a tour of South Asia and Southeast Asia around the year 1200. I'm going to answer those questions that are keeping you up at night. How did various belief systems affect their societies over time? And how did those states develop and maintain power? Well, don't worry, because I'm about to explain it up real nice for you. So if you're ready to get them brain cows milked, well, let's get to it. So first things first, if you have no idea what I'm talking about when I say South Asia and Southeast Asia, I'm talking about this place and this place. And the first thing you need to know about these places around the year 1200 is that three main belief systems have been well established and were struggling for dominance, namely Hinduism, Islam, and Buddhism. And by the way, if you want note guides to follow along with this video and get all its contents firmly crammed into your brain folds, well then check the link below for my video note guides. So let's start in South Asia, the main portion of which consists of this giant honking subcontinent known as India. So from time immemorial, the dominant religion in this region was Hinduism. And if you're in the mood for a gross oversimplification of its doctrines and beliefs, well, here it is. First, Hinduism is a polytheistic belief system, which means its adherents believe in many gods, not just one god like they do in monotheistic faiths like Judaism or Islam. Second, the ultimate goal of the believer is to reunite his or her individual soul to the all-pervasive world soul known as Brahman. But because human beings, for the most part, are the moral equivalent of sentient turds, that reunion with Brahman usually takes many lifetimes cycling through death and rebirth, otherwise known as reincarnation, to achieve. Now, what's very important to understand about Hinduism is that it created the conditions for a more or less unified culture in India for millennia. And one significant way that it did that was by structuring Indian society according to the caste system. Now, this was essentially a five-tiered system with the more virtuous people on top and what they considered the refuse of society on the bottom. And in general, it wasn't possible to move up in status during your lifetime, but if you were pretty good in this lifetime and avoided egregious sins like failing to disclose a camel's illness when selling said camel, well, then when you are reincarnated, maybe you get born into a higher caste. Okay, now I spent a good deal of time on Hinduism because it's real important to understanding Indian culture. But second, Buddhism established itself in South Asia as well. Now, I explained Buddhist beliefs in more detail in the video on East Asia, so I'm not going to rehash that here. However, it is important to know that Buddhism was founded in India and shares several beliefs with it. For example, Buddhism carried over the idea of the cycle of birth and death and reincarnation, and the ultimate goal was similar, which is to dissolve into the oneness of the universe. However, there were some significant differences as well. For example, Buddhism rejected the caste system and emphasized equality of all people, and that's crucial to understand, and let me explain. Now, Hinduism is what's known as an ethnic religion, which means that the belief system is tightly bound to a particular people in a particular place. And in general, ethnic religions don't spread very well. Like, can you imagine Hindu missionaries showing up in China and being like, all right, y'all, let's organize all your crap according to the caste system? Yeah, not gonna happen. But Buddhism is what's known as a universalizing religion, which means it can be planted in any culture without completely overturning that culture. And that means that a belief system like Buddhism is much more likely to spread. And I'll tell you more about that spread in a moment. But for now, you need to know that by the time 1200 rolled around, Buddhism's influence in the land of its birth was waning big time. Okay, now the third belief system you need to know for South Asia, Islam. And again, I talked about this in the last video. But here you need to know that in 1206, Turkic Muslim invaders came into South Asia and set up a Muslim empire known as the Delhi Sultanate. And that meant that in India, while Buddhism was going the way of the dodo, Islam became the second most important belief system there. And because in large parts of India, the Muslims were in charge, it became the religion of the elite, and then throughout Southeast Asia. Okay, we'll get back to the Delhi Sultanate a little bit later. But now I've neglected belief systems in Southeast Asia for far too long, so let's see what's going on over there. And to be fair, Southeast Asia was a very diverse place, but in general, states in this region practiced Hinduism, Buddhism, and Islam, and I'll show you what effect that had in a minute. But now that you know the three main belief systems present in this region, it's going to be important to know that during this period, each of them experienced some change as well. On the Hinduism front, a new expression of the faith known as the Bhakti movement arose. This was a form of Hinduism that encouraged believers to worship one particular god in the Hindu pantheon of gods. Additionally, it rejected the hierarchy of Hinduism and encouraged spiritual experiences of all people regardless of social status. And then Islam also experienced some change as well. Recall in the last video we talked about the rise of Sufism, which was a more mystical, spiritual, experience-based version of Islam. And I don't know about you, but I smell a comparison in the air. Now, Bhaktis and Sufis had a lot in common. Obviously, they fell under the banner of different belief systems, but both of them emphasized mystical experience. Both of them rejected the elaborate doctrines and religious requirements of the elite, and both of them emphasized access of spiritual experience to all people, which made both of them better candidates for spreading through the region. And finally, Buddhism changed as well during this period. Now, even though the original teachings of the Buddha emphasized access to enlightenment for all people, by this time in South Asia, it had become more and more exclusive. Basically, the only Buddhists seeking that sweet sweet nirvana sandwich were monks who had confined themselves to monasteries. So at least in South Asia, Buddhism was definitely on the decline. Okay, now let's turn the corner and talk about how states formed in these regions and how they maintain their power, and I reckon we ought to start with South Asia. Now earlier I mentioned that the Muslims had established the Delhi Sultanate in 1206 and it ruled over northern India. However, Muslim rulers in the Delhi Sultanate, even though, they were the ones in charge, had a lot of trouble imposing Islam on India. At the end of the day, Hinduism was just too dang entrenched socially and culturally, and so Islam remained a minority religion here. And there were other pockets of resistance to Muslim rule as well, namely the Rajput kingdoms, which was a collection of rival and warring Hindu kingdoms that had existed since before Muslim rule in northern India. And over time, some of them were conquered by Muslim rulers, but some of them maintained independent Hindu states. And to further annoy Muslim rulers in the north, a new and powerful Hindu kingdom was founded in the south, namely the Vijayanagara Empire in the 14th century, and the events leading to its establishment were kind of spicy. So Muslim sultans in the north wanted to extend the rule of the Delhi Sultanate to the south, so they sent a group of emissaries down there to make it happen. But as it turned out, those emissaries were Hindu who had converted to Islam, and once they found themselves out from under the watchful eyes of their Muslim overlords, they went ahead and tossed their Muslim faith in the trash and established a rival Hindu empire. So that's fun. Okay, now let's head over to Southeast Asia and see how state building is going over there. And first, let's begin with sea-based states. Now, back before our time period began, the Srivijaya Empire, which is here, ruled from the 7th to 11th centuries. Now, they were a Buddhist state, but they were also heavily influenced by Indian Hindu culture. And the main source of their power was their control over this little waterway right here, namely the Strait of Malacca. It was kind of the best way for merchants to get anywhere in the Indian Ocean, and so Srivijaya rulers got filthy rich by slapping taxes on ships passing through that strait. Okay, now later, which is to say the end of the 13th century, the Majapahit kingdom was established here on Java. Now, formerly it was a Hindu kingdom, but there were strong Buddhist influences there as well. The way the Majapahit maintained power was to create a tributary system among the various states in the region. And if you forgot what tributary means, it just means the reality that the Majapahit had the biggest popsicle of power in the region and exerted some control over other states by requiring tribute or goods and services from them. And finally, let's move out of the sea and check in with the major land-based states in Southeast Asia. And first, let's check in with the Sinhala dynasties right here in Sri Lanka. Now, this was a Buddhist state that existed in some form or another for something like 2,000 years, to which I say, dang. And maybe you're looking at this map and you're like, looks like an island to me, but you're just flapping your mouth hole about it being a land-based state. Excellent observation. Let me explain. When we designate a state a sea-based or a land-based state, what we're really talking about is where they get their power from, the sea or the land. Now remember, the Srivijaya and the Majapahit gathered up all the power in the region because they controlled the sea. But the Sinhala dynasties weren't messing around much in the sea because they had everything they needed for the most part right there on their land, which is why it is a land-based state. And then one more land-based state, let me introduce you to the Khmer Empire, which was located right here. Now, the Khmer Empire was founded as a Hindu empire, and that's kind of weird because didn't I say like 2 minutes ago that Hinduism was an ethnic religion and therefore didn't spread to other places? Well, yeah, but there are exceptions to the rule, and the Khmer Empire is one of them. Anyway, this became an exceedingly prosperous state, and so they took a lot of that boom boom and built the most magnificent Hindu temple in existence, namely Angkor Wat. It was supposed to represent the entire Hindu universe in a single building. But later, Khmer rulers converted to Buddhism, and they just went right ahead and added Buddhist statuary all over this temple without destroying the Hindu elements. And when two religions blend like that, we call it syncretism. Well, alright, click here to watch my other Unit 1 review videos, and click here to get your hands on my video note guides that are going to help you follow along and learn all the content of this course. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll catch you on the flip-flop. Heimler out.